Hello and welcome back to GearHeadGeeks, where in this video we're going to be rebuilding a vacuum operated petcock on a 1985 Kawasaki 1100 LTD. So let's get right to it. Have you noticed that sometimes when you park your bike it's dribbling a little bit of gas and you go to turn it off and maybe you didn't realize but there's no off. You look at it and it says on, reserve, and then there's a PRI. Well, that is what we call an automatic petcock. And there's two reasons it might be dribbling gas. If you left it on prime, that's just like turning a regular petcock to reserve. In an automatic petcock, it is a bypass of the vacuum system, and what it does is it does turn on reserve so that you can fill your carburetors and everything will be ready to start. When you're done, you need to turn it either to the on position or the reserve position, whichever is, if you've got enough gas, you go to on. Anyway, if your bike is dribbling and it's in the on position or the reserve position, it may mean that your automatic petcock isn't working, and then it's time for a rebuild. So I'm going to walk you through the entire rebuild process of rebuilding one of these petcocks. It's not real hard, you just got to be very, very careful. So we'll get to that and we'll go step by step and you can see what's going on with it. So the first thing you need to do before you do anything when you're working on a petcock, if the tank is still on the bike, you need to remove the tank. So in this case on the LTD, you have to remove the seat, which entails removing the toolbox and unbolting the seat and then lifting it out of there, and then we'll get the tank off. We can pull those loose. And these are just vent lines at this point. There is no evaporative emissions in there. So now the next thing to do is we need to remove the fuel lines. And to do that, you kind of just have to get it, depending on where your petcock is, you can just kind of pull it up like this. And in this case, there's a vacuum line and a fuel line. Now, this petcock is probably leaking, which it is. So I'm just going to try and get it out of the way the best I can. And now I need to remove the fuel gauge line. So now the tank is off. I'm leaning it forward so it's not leaking so much, but this thing is just leaking and it needs to be dealt with. So let me get this over to the bench. Good shape. So using a number 3 screwdriver, and now you just pull the petcock out. The filter in this one, this doesn't have a bowl like many petcocks do. A lot of them have a bowl down here that catches any sediment. This one here just has a filter, and the filter in this one is in pretty good shape. Not terrible. So anyway, the petcock's out. I think I'm going to remove the tank and move it to another location so we're not hitting on it. And, okay, so we have our petcock here. And I'm just going to take a paper towel and just kind of mop up anything on this, any excess dirt, whatever, just to get started. So we'll start here with the valve. And if you notice your valve is chunky, which this one is, when I say chunky, you go to turn it, it's not smooth. It's usually because the rubber seal back here has deteriorated. And they do. Now there's rebuild kits available. I got a rebuild kit for this. I actually went to the dealer and I asked for one, and they found one on one of their usable suppliers. But all that we need to do here is take off this. It's only got 2 screws in it. There's a spring which holds this thing down, and there's a And this is the little valve that goes in there. And if you, as you can see, this thing is really crusty, and this gasket has pretty much deteriorated. So even and this is where you select between on, off, on, reserve, and prime. And so to understand what that all means is, on means that it will draw, when there is vacuum on this port, it will draw fuel from the top post. So that means that the fuel level comes down, comes down, comes down, and the top one will, there's a tube inside here, and the fuel level comes down and it will draw from the top. Then once it can't do that anymore, your bike sputters, and then what you need to do is move it to reserve. And when there's vacuum on this, when it's running, it will pull from the bottom here. But there's also another position. There's no off position because it's being turned on and off by this vacuum. But there is another position called prime. And that is when there's no vacuum and the carburetors might be empty for whatever reason, for sitting for a long time, but they need fuel, you turn it to prime and it bypasses the vacuum and it will pull from the reserve. No matter what. It won't try to pull from the top. It'll always pull from the reserve, which is down here, and it will turn on the fuel. So if you just want your fuel on all the time, you could turn it to prime and it's on no matter what. So with that being said, what we need to do here is we need to take a quick, let's see if we can't get this gasket out. And it's still flexible, but it's just beat up on both sides. It started to deteriorate because this bike had been sitting for probably 30 years, or 25 to 30 years. It's just been sitting and the gas was in pretty rough shape. But it's not, this thing is not horrible. It just needs some TLC. So now the next thing we need to do, and I use this plug right here to plug it off when I was pulling it off so it wasn't leaking all over, because this thing doesn't really shut off very well. So let's pull these 4 screws and take a look at our diaphragm. Now on that diaphragm there's going to be an O-ring, and that's what allows this thing to turn on and off. And if that O-ring is deteriorated, you can probably sometimes just replace the O-ring and at least it'll turn on and off. Let's just say your gasket here is in good shape, but it's still not turning on and off. You might be able to repair it this way. So anyway, we're gonna pull this up, and I'm being kind of gentle here so you can see the diaphragm seems to be in pretty good shape. The O-ring, it's hard to see on camera, but it doesn't look that great. And it could be that it's okay. It's just that there's a bunch of crud in here, not allowing that to seal off. So this probably could be used again because it really is in reasonably good shape, it seems like. And I'll look at it. We'll clean it up. We'll clean this guy up and come back. And after it's all cleaned up, then we'll assess what we need to do, if we need to use the rebuild kit, which we are going to have to because this guy is just done. But if nothing else, let's get this guy all cleaned up, and I'm going to use the ultrasonic to do this because it is the best way to clean up petcocks, carburetors, and things like that. It just does a great job. So we'll be back after this is cleaned up. Oh, here's another problem. See this O-ring around the outside? It's done. Well, you can see how done it is. So that O-ring, which seals up around here, is done. So that wasn't helping matters at all. So let's get this, I'll get it cleaned up and we'll take a look at the rest of this. I'm not sure if we want to take it apart quite yet. And another thing you have to do is make sure your rebuild kit is correct. That is pretty important. So anyway, I'll get this cleaned up and we'll go from there. So while that's cooking in the ultrasonic, let's take a look at our rebuild kit. And this guy looks to be the correct one. Everything looks like it's the right size. The diaphragms look like they're the right size. And this is made by K&S Technologies. So if you look up K&S, you'll be able to find those. And then it just tells you all the things it is good for. And the good part is most of these petcocks are made by like, you know, a standard manufacturer. This particular one is Tioga Beacon. Okay. But anyway, so let's take a look and see what we got. And from what I can see, that O-ring is good. This is the O-ring that goes and seals up against the tank. Our new gasket is the right size, and it looks like these are the right ones, so we're going to put the new ones in there. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to gently, because this is still good. I mean, I can still use it in maybe some other old bike or something if I ever need one. So I'm going to do my very best to peel this other diaphragm off without turning it if I can. And so far I'm not, well, I'm starting to get it. There we go. I got it started. I'm using a sharp knife and then just kind of peeling it gently because it is stuck. And it's coming loose. And whenever you have something like this, take a little bit of denatured alcohol or something like that and just kind of squirt it in there, and that'll help it unstick a little bit. It's just, yeah, and look what it did. It just popped right off as soon as I did that. There's a spring inside. Oh yeah, this is in pretty good shape. So we will be replacing these guys. We'll be replacing this, but we're going to keep it just because you never know if you might need it someday. And the way to get these out is you got to kind of push it through. There's a hole in this, and you got to kind of push it through without damaging anything. And there it is. So there's our diaphragm in relatively good shape. It's still soft and pliable. Doesn't have any holes in it. So we're okay. So here's a secret. See how nice and shiny that is? All I did is I went over to the sink. I used some aluminum brightener. So if you have some zinc plated parts, which is the zinc plated, and they're kind of old and ugly, hit it with some aluminum brightener and it just turns it into that. I did nothing more than spray it and rinse it off, and that's it. So to start our reassembly process, what we need to do here is we've got our diaphragm and we need to insert it into this little plastic guy, and this guy has got two sides to it. There's an indented side, which is really meant to take this part right here, and there's another part that we have to, this can only fit on to the little vacuum port one way. It's being cleaned at the moment, but we'll get this started. So all that you really need to do here, and it's kind of fiddly, I'm going to move the camera down to where we can look and watch what's going on. And it's not terrible. There's some holes in the diaphragm here that get indexed into these little pins. So, but the first thing you have to do is get this plastic in between these two. There's two diaphragms in here. There's an outer and an inner. And the outer one, which would be the one that goes toward the vacuum, so, and it will get the little indentation to accept that. So what you got to do is you got to kind of carefully pull the diaphragm through this hole without tearing anything up. It's not really hard to do. You just have to be gentle and be careful, and it'll come through. We're almost there. Just gently. Brute force and ignorance is not the order of the day here. Now, second that you have to do is you have to align those pins. And here's one pin right there. You can see that. Yeah, point at it. Here's one pin right here. And then the other one's going to be right here. So you just need to pull those pins over the top. And again, you have to be very, very gentle when you do this stuff. Push that over the top. Get your diaphragm laid out. And then you'll be doing basically the same thing to the other side. There's some pins. You just need to make sure that they're indexed in. And they are. And this guy is ready to be put back together. So after a quick 30-minute bath in the ultrasonic, this thing is sanitary. All that junk came out. Everything that was, all the little pieces are all gone. They're just in great shape. This guy is looking great. And the vacuum port is perfect. So the only thing I like to do a little bit here is on this one, I take a little bit of Scotch-Brite and just make sure this is nice and smooth. And I kind of work it this way, just to make sure there's nothing that's going to cause this thing to have problems with the gasket, because it does slide over it. And you can see there's a little discoloration there, so let's just make sure it's all cleaned up and nice. And that's good enough. It's smooth. Okay, so now what needs to happen here is this O-ring goes around it. So let's get that done. So that's ready to go back in. So the next thing we want to do is take our diaphragm, which we have already indexed the pins, this one here and this one here, and we need to index this into here. Now, there is only one way for this to go on. There's two ways for this to go on, but you can use either way. But one pin goes here and one pin goes there. And all you got to do is gently, and when I say gently, you need to be careful. Make sure your pins are aligned with the diaphragm, which in this case we have to, a little hard with these gloves, but we'll get it. Okay, and you got to make sure you can actually see the entire end of the pin. Okay, and then what we're going to do is carefully index. Here's our pin, here's where our pin goes, and we're just going to carefully index that in to where it just goes in. And you'll see the little plastic seat. You can feel it seat right on there. It is on there. Now, gently, and still gently, making sure our pins are indexed. There's one here, and there's one here. We need to put there's a little spring that goes on here, which pushes against that. Now, this guy can go on in two different ways. It could actually fit on four ways, but this way is impossible because it'd be hitting the tank. This way is impossible because you couldn't get the line out. But you may want to go toward the front or toward the back. In this particular case, this would be front on this one, and then we can go toward the back. So you look on your motorcycle and just make sure where you're coming from. And in our case, this needs to go toward the back. So make sure your pins are lined up. And then you put this on gently, I mean really, really gently, and you can feel it snap into place. So all of our pins are in. If you look, there's no gap at all, and this is pointing toward the back as we want. So the best thing to do now is get a couple screws in this bad boy, and don't tighten them down yet. Just get a couple screws so it doesn't fly apart. And gently tighten them down. I mean really gently. But now it's together. It's not going to fly apart. You can then put in the other two screws. and gently get those guys in. Okay, and now what we're going to do is we're just going to snug these down evenly but gently. And the diaphragm is done. It is ready to go. So now what we want to do is we need to get a little lube on this guy. Some silicone lube or something of that nature. And this is just some silicone protectant lubricant. Put it on there. Everything's nice and clean. Make sure it all goes on. And a little bit of silicone on this guy does not hurt either. So you just take this, place it in there. It goes in any way. You can't put it in wrong. It just goes in. And then you just take this guy, and you may have a little bit of issue getting that O-ring to start, and you got to make sure you don't mess it up. So you just kind of give it a twist, and now here we are. We've got it all in there. I'm going to give this a few twists all the way around so that everything seats up nicely. And then I'll put it in the bottom position here. That really doesn't matter what that is. Now there's a spring that holds that in. And of course we have our little plate that we cleaned up. I can take this guy and we'll put the screw in there. Gloves make it a little hard, but that's okay. And we got another one. And again, when we tighten things down, when we first start, we get them just snug. You can see there's very little pressure, just whatever I can turn on that shaft with my fingers. Just enough to hold it. And now that both of them are snugged down, then you can take them and just tighten them down to a nice level. Don't over torque them, just okay. So now what we have here is a completely rebuilt Petcock. Reserve, prime, on. So when it's on the bike and you're going for you want it to the on position, and it'll draw from, there's a tube inside here which goes up to about here, it looks like. It'll draw from that tube, and then once it gets below that, the bike will sputter, obviously, and then you can go reserve, and it'll pull from the bottom. And then when you're doing a fresh start or the bike's been sitting for a long time, you can turn it to prime, and that will allow fuel to flow out of the reserve nozzle through without having any vacuum on it. So what we have here is a completely rebuilt Petcock, ready to go back on. The only thing that's a little tough on these, and this O-ring that goes in here can slip out, but this one's being very agreeable. So you can see, you just put that on there, and then we can go on ahead and we'll bring the tank back and bolt this on and go from there. What I might do. Okay, so I decided to bring the tank over to the bench because I need to show you, well, I mean, we need to clean this off a little bit. And so what I usually do here is just take a little bit of Scotch-Brite and just give it a little bit of a scrub. Sometimes what ends up happening is the paint on the tank gets eaten away by the gasoline over time. I mean, this has had, you know, a lot of years to do that. So make sure you get it a little bit clean. No big deal, just that. And now all that we have to do, our O-ring is in place, and all we need to do is put this in and gently put it in. And you got to kind of work it. Okay, and then we'll just take one of these and a number 3 screwdriver, and we'll get that started. And I can't really put pressure on the screws yet because I'll push the tank over. And like everything else we do on Gearhead Geeks, we always clean up our screws, nuts, bolts, and fasteners, because that's all part of making things nice. Okay, so now what we have here, then we're going to take a 10mm socket, and I'm just going to go on ahead and tighten these guys down gently. I'm not getting crazy here. Nice and even, just nice and snug and tight. Good. So now that our Petcock is all rebuilt, all we got to do is put our tank back on. So we'll put the tank down here, get it started in the front, and then the first thing you need to do is plug in the, if you have, in this case I'm just going to plug in the fuel gauge. Alright, so now the tank can sit down a little bit. We've got two lines. We've got a vacuum line, and let's see if I can show you, we have our fuel line. So all you want to do is grab your fuel line, pop it on there, and then you take your vacuum line and pop it on to it. A little hard to get at, but vacuum line is on. Put your tank back down, and the two vent lines. One goes here, and the other one goes here. And your tank is all ready to go. It now shuts off. And all that we need to do is put the rest of it back together. And again, that's just a matter of taking and putting the seat into place. Got a couple little hooks in it. Okay. Lock it up, and we are done. And that is all there is to rebuilding a vacuum petcock. Again, the vacuum petcock is nothing more than something when there's vacuum and the engine is running, it opens it up so that the reserve and on work. And if your carburetors are empty, you can turn it to prime. But after you're done with prime, you got to make sure that after it's running, turn it back to on or reserve, because prime acts just like reserve would in any regular petcock. So just remember that. So anyway, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time here on Gearhead Geeks. And please don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. And again, we'll catch you next time.